Hello and welcome to Lansing's Movers and Shakers. I'm Ken Miller. I'm joined by Leavenworth County Register of Deeds, TerriLois Mashburn. TerriLois, thank you very much for coming by today.
Thank you for
First
having
time
me.
on the show.
It
by
is.
The way. Okay, good deal. So since it's your first time, let's start with your background a little bit. Talk about your time as Register of Deeds, but maybe start with what you did before that.
Well, I've had 30 years of public and private administration experience. Previously, I was a Kansas State representative, and I carried a bill which equalized some inequities in passenger trains.
Mm-hmm.
That opened up the door for the Kansas Bell Dinner train to move to Baldwin City. I also was...
I took that tour, by the way,
Yeah,
back in the day,
right?
long time ago.
Yes,
yeah, right.
yeah. The old 40s
Mm-hmm.
music and everything. Right. And then I also was a regional supervisor for a centralized business office of 4 metropolitan hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, I was a data processing auditor, which has always kept me keenly aware of data security.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things on my agenda when I became Register of Deeds was to get off of the local server, and we moved into Bastion. That was an off-site, fully staffed data processing facility,
Mm-hmm.
and they withstand F5 tornadoes and hackers and a whole lot
Is that
more.
considered cloud, in the cloud?
Well, no, it's not actually the cloud because they hold the servers
Okay.
right there. And if that facility was ever destroyed, the entire facility is replicated 5 states away. And the importance of that really came to light when, you remember when Wyandotte was attacked?
Yes, right.
Okay, virtually all of the city county offices were shut down except one office, Register of Deeds, because they had just gone to Bastion prior to that attack. So that kind of proved out why I was so adamant to move us off of the local server.
Sure. Okay, so in general, you were elected Register of Deeds. Was that in 22?
I was elected in 20. I started
Okay.
in 21.
21, okay. So, county resident, what can you do at the Register of Deeds if you need to do what you need to do?
Well, most people, they sign when they purchase a home, they sign their deed and their mortgage at a title company. And they don't really realize those documents have to be filed in my office. But we also file city liens, you didn't mow your yard, Kansas state tax liens, UCC paperwork. We file DD 214s, which are the military discharge, and those documents are secured. They're not for public view, and I secured the tapes in a locked vault. We also do plats and surveys. A subdivision is created. We file those, and we help people with genealogy research. Ever since the scanning project was finished, we have a lot more beautiful documents for people to research. But basically, we don't walk past a problem. If we find something that's wrong, we really try to fix it. And our goal is to be the bridge for the citizen walking in to county government, and we want to help make your experience with government good. So even if people are asking us questions which are not our department, we try to go the extra step and help them.
Sure.
Such as when you file a document, we now mail out a digital copy of a document, and that's helpful. Let's say that someone has passed. Well, we send you a redacted copy of a death certificate, and so it's safer to email to other companies when you're closing your loved one's accounts.
Good to know. And this isn't a generalization, but is it safe to say or accurate to say that the Register of Deeds office is really a repository of official record?
It is.
Okay.
We are responsible to maintain and preserve and protect all land records, and we have back to pre-statehood.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned the scanning project, and we had talked about this a little bit earlier. You really initiated that when you took office, and I would imagine decades and decades ago, obviously everything was done on paper. This is a big project from what I understand, and it's obviously going to be very helpful for those who either need to do research or who just want to look at things to not have to go through either paper or microfiche to do so.
Exactly.
Okay.
Paper, that was it, and they tried to save paper, so multiple documents were written on one page. And the scanning project, I brought in a picture. That picture is literally a third of the deed books that we brought back into our research vault so that we could scan page by page. We had 3 different types of scanners. It was depending on how the book was made that they used, and it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for over 3 weeks. And they used infrared and other light spectrums to pull details off of the documents. And we were flabbergasted when we saw the first results. The microfilm was state of the art 50 years ago, but it's grainy, it's hard to read. We'd have to do adjustments to very light to very dark to try and compensate for how it was. And there were also reverse images, and those are hard to read. You would lose the detail of like a seal. But we scanned in 445,000 images, and that the scanning project was the start. Now then, we have beautiful, clear, crisp detail that you can see on the documents, but it's just the image. We have to read each one of those images and then transfer information into specific fields that are then searchable.
Oh, right.
And
So it's really only half the battle to get it
Yes.
scanned.
Yes.
Right.
And my phenomenal staff, they are doing about, they're averaging about 200 documents a day. And at that phenomenal pace, it'll be about 6 years, and every document back to pre-statehood will be searchable. And, go ahead.
Yeah, and 6 years from now, somebody would be able to get on a computer terminal, or who knows what we're using but you would be able to search every document and be able to pull it up and see from 1888 or whatever.
Yeah.
Wow.
1854, you can search by the grantor's name, the grantee's name, the document date, the type of document that it is, the legal description, which is how the professional researchers from title companies and banks usually are referencing. But as a courtesy to the citizens, when possible, and we have the 123 Main Street, like you would mail a letter.
Right.
We are entering that address too. So the citizen who isn't used to seeing meets and bounds descriptions
Parcel
could go,
numbers.
yes.
Right.
This is my document. So, and I do want to point out that this project, just the scanning, was around $250,000. And we did not use tax dollars for that. We used earned fees from just our daily work in the Register of Deeds office to pay for that project.
Okay. All right. And this is something that you and I actually talked about personally a year ago. I know you were at a city council meeting, but one of the things, and you've really spearheaded this, is signing people up for property fraud alerts. So let's start with how big a problem property fraud is currently, and not just in Leavenworth County, but really nationally.
I actually sit on a national task force prevention committee through PRIA, which is Property Records Industry Association, and $547 million in damages was attributed to title theft in 2020, and 2 years later it ballooned to, I've heard, anywhere from $3 billion to $10 billion. The FBI says it's the fastest growing white collar crime in America right now, mortgage theft and also title theft. So on this task force, I get to meet some incredible registers of deed from all over. And I met the Detroit Register of Deeds. He has returned over 400 stolen properties.
Wow.
And he built the first task force committee, if you will. He works in conjunction with the sheriff's office and with the prosecuting office and then his office. And while I admire his work, I never want the county to get to those numbers.
Right.
It's bad enough every now and then, here and there. We had another one this week. But this service was actually started in 2014. And 7 years later, when I took office, we had less than 1,300 subscriptions. In the last 3 years, we've added over 24,000 subscriptions. And Fiddler Technologies is our recording software company, and they're our partner in this. Everything that's recorded daily is compared to the subscriber database. And if there's a match, the person gets an alert either by phone, text, or email, and usually it's all three. And they said that in 2023, that was our third year in a row of being #1 in the state of Kansas for the most new subscriptions. And in the actual numbers, Leavenworth County was literally 1/3 of all the new subscriptions in Kansas. We are that far ahead. And we placed, for the second year in a row, top 10 in the United States. And I don't say that to brag, I say that because the more people that are subscribed, there's an exponential protection factor. Because they're talking about it, it's out in the community, people are aware of it. I did the billboard, I do mailers, the flyers are going to be going out again March 1st, so citizens are going to receive that in their reevaluation letter from the appraiser's office. And so I'm just going to say you don't have to register again. Once somebody is registered, that it's good for 200 years, literally 200.
And let's say I wanted to, and I've already registered, but if I wanted to register but I didn't live in Leavenworth County, I could still register with you, correct?
Okay, we can subscribe people who have property in Atchison, Leavenworth, Wyandotte, Miami, Shawnee, Jefferson, Franklin. We cannot register in Douglas or Johnson County because Douglas has a separate system that they do their registrations, and Johnson County does not yet have a system, but I understand that they're doing research right now, trying to get that.
That surprises me a little bit. Usually they're ahead of the curve, right?
You would think that. But, I mean, for 3 years I have been working towards 100% ownership that is subscribed, and it's we're really starting to hit our momentum. We have people that we partner with title companies and banks, and when I do a booth, it's really kind of interesting, Ken, because people that don't know each other, one is sitting there thinking about, do I want to do this? And another person walks up and starts telling them their story about what happened with their alert, and they're like, it's really great, you need to sign up, and I don't have to say anything.
Right, great. All right, so let's take, I guess, a couple of steps into what people can expect. So a resident signs up. What kind of communication do they get initially? And I can tell you from personal experience, I mean, my name is Ken Miller, so it's kind of a common name. So I get alerts probably more often than a lot of people do, simply because I have a common name. But it's immediate, and but if somebody's new and they just sign up, what can they expect? Okay,
so initially a person will get welcome emails and welcome texts. We do that because we're testing right now to make sure that the information is in there and correct. We don't want 3 years from now, after the fact, to find out you didn't get notified because the wrong email was in or whatever. So it's important people know that the text comes from area code 563. And once they receive that initial welcome text, it's really in their best interest to take that and make that a contact in their cell phone. That way, 3 or 5 years from now, you get this 563 area code and you're like, oh, I don't know that, blast it off to voicemail or something, not pay attention to it. And if it is fraud, we try to get as many contact points as we can because we want to get a hold of you right away. If it is fraud, there's 2 victims. One victim is you, because it's your property, it's been title theft. And the second victim is the unsuspecting buyer. They do not know that they're part of a fraud. And so if no one tells them that, they go in, they tear out the kitchen and do a $100,000 remodel job. Then they find out, hey, this really isn't my house. They turn around and they countersue you, the true owner, for unjust gains. And so it becomes a huge quagmire. But if they know immediately, we can start addressing the fact there. After those initial welcomes, there's no marketing emails, there's no marketing phone calls. They will only be contacted in relation to something that refers to their property and their land. The text comes in and it says property fraud alert, and the phone call, you'll actually hear my voice. And I introduce myself, TerriLois, Mashburn. I'm Leavenworth County Register of Deeds. You signed up for this service. Please have a pen ready because we're getting ready to give you information. We used to just have this mechanical voice and people thought the alert was a scam. So we added my voice to the front. And the thing is, 99%, even though fraud is in the name, property fraud alert, 99% of all the alerts are valid alerts. And it's very good to keep you updated, such as if your mortgage is released. Banks, they very seldom ever write paid off on the mortgage paper and send it back to you. They just file it in my office. So now then, when you get a mortgage release notice, you need to call the county treasurer's office and change the tax statement to be mailed to your home because the bank's no longer escrowing. Otherwise, you're going to get the late payment fee. And another...
so the alert would alert you to that happening.
That something has been filed. And another really good example is a couple received a medical lien had been filed on them. And they called me and said, well, why didn't insurance pay that? I said, that's a good question. Why don't you call your insurance company? Normally, medical liens are not discovered until like 15 years later when you get ready to sell your home and try to settle something with an insurance company 15 years after the fact. So they filled out Form XYZ, got it corrected. Insurance paid the hospital and the lien was released. So it helps keep everybody on top of things.
Yeah, good. All right, so, and you kind of given us a couple of examples in your last answer, and obviously without identifying anyone, tell us about a case where a property owner lost everything, and maybe to turn this around and make it a happy ending, where they were almost ready to lose everything, but the service kind of protected them and it got reversed.
Well, on top of this service, one thing that I initiated was I check photo IDs when someone walks in with a document that would convey property. And I can tell you, I absolutely know for sure we've stopped 3 fraud attempts.
Oh, wow.
Because when I ask for the ID and they give you the kind of the deer in the headlights look and they exit the office real quick, it's pretty obvious.
Wow.
They didn't own the property.
That's brazen to walk in there and think you're going to get away with it.
It is, but the thing of it is so sad, Ken, is it's way too easy. I mean, my number one priority is to try and get legislation passed in Kansas that gives the Register of Deeds more authority to try and fight property fraud. Literally, if the document is executed correctly, I'm required by state statute to file that document if I can't find an error on it, even if I know it's fraud. And that's heartbreaking. That should not happen. I'm hoping for more, authority by the Register of Deeds to say, hey, let's set this aside for 5 days. We need to do some more research on this. One of the fraud cases that we discovered 11 years after the fact, and the perpetrator is now dead, so not much recourse. But a simple check of who actually owned the property would have stopped that before it. And we're so committed to try and fight fraud that before we file a document, we check the owner, we check the legal description, we check a photo ID, we check death certificates, and we index the notary that was on the document. Now, that may seem strange. Why would you index the notary?
Right.
Well, in my work nationally, the first thing that the police ask for in a fraud case is who's the notary. And if you have a history, when they go back and they search that notary name, they can actually find a series of fraudulent documents and also help to break up rings.
So the notary is a perpetrator as well,
It can
potentially.
Can be.
Right.
I will say, a lot of times notaries are innocently a party to a fraud, and they, they were caught unawares. The really professional rings, they have someone that works in a mortgage, banking industry. They have someone who works in a title company. They have someone who's a notary, and then the front man, and they all work in concert. They would fraudulently release the mortgage so that the fraudster gets the full amount of the sale of the property. So, and the saddest case that I've ever worked with had an elderly gentleman come in, and he said, "I think my son stole my property." So I looked it up and I gave him the document, and when he read it, he was just like, "They both did it to me. That's my daughter-in-law's handwriting."
Wow.
And sadly, I'd say half the cases, there's a family relationship that's involved. And his son title stole his home while he was recuperating from a stroke. Took him a year and a half. I said, "Sir, if you would have had this service, you'd have known about it the next day."
Right.
So it mostly is a good thing when you get the property fraud alert notice, because it's just keeping you updated. You filed a transfer on death deed, or you sold your home. But if you ever receive an alert that says deed somewhere in the document type, it could be a sheriff's deed, a quitclaim deed, a warranty deed, but if deed is in that title and you didn't sell your home, get a hold of the sheriff right away, because that is
somebody's trying to sell it out from under you.
Somebody's trying to sell it.
Right.
And I mean, if you made me queen for a day, everybody who has property as an individual that's not in a trust, they would have a transfer on death deed on file. It's normally only $21 to file. It answers the question, if I and my spouse die in the same car wreck, who gets my property? And that stops family squabbles down the road. A will is a really good idea, but it can be contested. If someone has a transfer on death deed on file, it just sits there in limbo, and it isn't until your death that it conveys the property. If you passed it to your child.
Right. It's cut and dry who's going to get it.
Exactly.
Right.
And they come in, they file your death certificate. It not only removes your name from the voter rolls, it updates the appraiser's ownership page that you can access on the county page, updates the tax rolls, and your descendant walks out of my office owning that property. It's that simple. Not thousands of dollars for law fees and years in court for probate.
Right. One last thing I wanted to touch on, and you brought it up, you mentioned potential legislation that would give the Register of Deeds office a little more power to maybe slow down certain movements to try and get property illegally. Have you put together a draft bill? Do you have a champion that's currently in Topeka? Where are you in that process?
Well, yes. I have had 3 bills shot down. You can have a really good idea, but when it gets to the revisor's office, they're like, okay, we have conflict here, 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 here. Legislation doesn't change quickly, and we've got land laws 150 years old when they didn't understand internet and copy machines and Bitcoin, and they're in the wind in seconds. So I actually have had an impact regionally, because one of the people on the task force is Christopher Wright, and he's the recorder for Platte County, Missouri. And the billboard that I put up, he liked that idea so much, he went to his Board of County Commissioners, he put that up. But we discuss all the time legislation that we could move forward. As a simple thing as the notary stamp. you can go to any Office Depot
Mm-hmm.
and have a stamp created. Well, what if only the Secretary of State's office would issue the notary stamps? I mean, that right there could help.
Right.
And the photo ID, what if that was state law and every office had to look at that? What if we had, and these I'm copying from other states, the state of, I'm not going to say it because I'm not for sure, they have a new law, and I think it's Michigan, but they have a law where if someone walks in and the Register of Deeds feels like fraud might be involved, they can set aside. That, that's where I got the idea for the set aside. And my idea, there's a lawyer I'm working with in Bloomington, and she likes the idea, but the implementation of it is, how would this be accomplished? You can freeze your credit, right?
Right.
With the 3 major credit bureaus. What if you froze your deed? And if anybody walked in to convey property, it could not be conveyed until the owner gave the password or gave the passcode and released the freeze.
So if you got the fraud alert and you see that something's
prior to the fraud.
it's
So
prior to the fraud alert.
the misunderstanding with property fraud alert is that it stops fraud. It does not. It's a notification service, which means something has to be filed before you get the notification. So the fraud has already occurred. But the power of it is it's an immediate notification. And they can get a hold of the sheriff. They can, what I said, the second victim, the perpetrators usually identity theft, come in and purport to be you. They convey your property without your knowledge or permission to someone else for financial gain. Their name is never in the paperwork at all. And so with the title freeze, I'm trying to stop the fraud from ever happening. It would have to be released, but I can tell you, every title company, every broker, every banker, they would be against that, because anything that slows down the turnaround process, they usually would not be in favor of it. So we tweak and we refine and we keep attempting to come up with other things. So, but I do want to say I'm available. I go out, I give public speeches, any service group, any church organization, whoever would need a speaker presentation.
Sure.
And I'm happy to talk to anybody, evening or weekends, I don't care what.
All right, good deal. Well, I've been speaking with Leavenworth County Register of Deeds TerriLois Mashburn. For Movers and Shakers, I'm Ken Miller.